But do you think Tinyman can check the IPs of the users, like the MAC addresses and the IP addresses can be checked by the hackers actually?
So I'm pretty sure the exploiter didn't use any Tinyman website to use the exploit because it's simply not actually possible on their site. What you need to do to use the exploit is to write your own script, to send your own transaction, which is Tinyman does it correctly in every aspect of their website. So they have all the checks needed, stuff like that. But if you do it directly to the blockchain, so you send your own transaction to the blockchain with your own script without using actually Tinyman, you can then create those spoofed transactions. So Tinyman themselves cannot know the IPs and MAC addresses unless the person also used Tinyman on that wallet, which I'm not entirely sure they did. But I'm pretty sure Algorand themselves can get in contact with KuCoin because that's the funds that were initially deposited into the wallet came from. And Algorand does have contacts to make this happen, to get these funds back. So I don't think we have to worry about the thief actually, running out with almost $250,000 in stolen assets. So Tinyman probably don't have the ability to track the person, but Algorand has already been informed and they could technically do something.
Wow, thank you so much for a great answer. Yeah, that's it's very clear. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Are you a developer, Gregor? Are you a developer?
Yes, I am the main developer of TinyTrack.
Oh, cool, cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us more. What do you think about the situation?
It's a bit funny. I don't think anyone expected this to happen because both the runtime verification, the auditors of Tinyman protocol and Tinyman themselves, they didn't find this in time. There's some running theory currently that in the audit itself, there was some error that is similar, but this is not the exploit that's happening. So both runtime verification and Tinyman did not find this exploit. So it's not like runtime verification gave them the exploit and they didn't fix it. It's not that case. It's just was found basically as zero-day exploit, and they had no way of fixing it before launching Tinyman. It's just a little bit interesting. What I'm a little bit worried about is that now the only solution to actually fix this is to launch new smart contracts. And since Tinyman is a trustless protocol, they don't have access to any funds that are currently in the pools or any funds anywhere on their platform. So they can only pretty much release a new DEX and ask people to start using it, but they cannot move the funds themselves.
Yeah. One thing I just want to make clear, thank you, Gregor, by the way, that's a good explanation of everything, is what does getting an audit mean? Everybody I talk to thinks like, oh, well, runtime verification audited it, so it must be clear of bugs. Let me explain what an audit is. So when you write an application, you do it the best you possibly can, and you try to actually make sure that there's no bugs in your code, and you create proper tests, and just make sure that you do everything you possibly can, and then you call a third party up. In this case, runtime verification. Say, hey, runtime verification, I have spent the last 5-6 months writing this application. I want you to spend the next 4 to 6 weeks looking at my code, knowing nothing about it, and trying to find any errors that I don't have. So yes, runtime verification is, or any auditor is specialized in finding, auditing code, but it's 90% of code safety is up to the developers themselves, and 10% is the auditor's job to see if there's any extra issues. So as much as we want to actually, chase somebody down and have a witch hunt, auditors aren't the silver bullet to say, hey, if it's been audited, it's 100% clear. This is why auditors don't give guarantees. They do their best. They look at everything they possibly can, and they try to catch everything. And you can look at the audit reports. I do. There's several people in our community that looks at the audit reports and says, hey, please fix these things, or there's gonna be an issue. But when you're writing manual code, but smart contract code, it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it's even harder to actually audit it. So these types of things happen in blockchain. There are ways to, make it better, make it easier to write safe things. But blockchain development's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to also mention this, that especially developing on Teal is nothing like traditional programming, because you are basically interacting with the blockchain itself directly. So things work very differently than how traditional programming works like. And you have a lot of constraints that you have to work around in order to make this trustless. And I'm not. We shouldn't really blame anyone on this issue, because I'm sure Runtime did their best to check all the things they could. It's just a little bit unfortunate that this one thing got slipped, and it's a very creative use of the transaction either, because what the exploiter had to do is to basically send. When you send this Tinyman transaction, you have to send the assets that you are trading, and they basically sent a spoofed transaction where they sent the first asset twice, so basically doubled the IDs in that transaction, which allowed for this exploit to happen. Which there was a check to make this special case for an Algorand transaction, but this check is skipped if you're sending the same assets twice, which is a little bit unfortunate, because it's a very creative use, and I don't doubt that it wasn't very easy to find that either, especially with all the difficulty in Teal itself, because as I said, it's very close to like the lowest level layer of programming. It's very close to assembly itself.
Yeah, anyone blame the hacker or the exploiter, okay? Not just pointing it out and taking the money and ran. That's the only person to be blamed.
Yeah. I think you guys all have heard me say multiple times that I don't trust manually written smart contracts. This is not because there's not super super smart people in auditing it. It's just that it is very hard to write a contract without a bug. Jay, my co-founder, he always tells me that there's 100% chance that a smart contract has a bug. It's just a matter of time before somebody finds it. But this is what we live with. This is what we've always been doing. This is why in Solidity, nobody writes custom contracts anymore. They just go find a contract that has already been used and tweak it as little as they possibly can because of these type of risks.
So bug bounties. We need more bug bounties, I think.
That would be a good thing.
The payloads need to be significantly higher than what's exploitable. So would have had to be worth more than 250,000 or $1 million.
I mean, I'm pretty sure we're up to like, are we over like a few $1 million that's been taken?
It was 3 million according to Tinyman. Around 3 million.
So yeah, the bug bounties, I think they, especially when an ecosystem is developing and it's so early, and these things which on a more developed network, there's more options. So if one app isn't working correctly, you can go to a different one that will offer similar or the same thing. But right now, because we're so early and we have to all work together to try to build something greater than the individual that we can each give, we have to make sure that the security is on point. And if that means maybe, you know, starting a security audit DAO or something like that, you know, or just pooling funds from communities. So if there's a big exploit like this, people can have a funded bug bounty program or something like that. What would you guys think about an idea like that?
I mean,
If
it would be probably a good
DeFi
allocation.
come over,
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say if we could get Immune DeFi to branch over to Algorand, I think that could give us a boost.
What's Immune DeFi?
They're one of the largest protocols with like losses from hacks and stuff like that. Like they just paid out Maddox. They paid out Maddox bug bounty, which is like one of the highest ever paid out. I think it was like $2 million. But yeah, because Matic was just hacked the beginning of December. But they have a agreement with Immune DeFi, so they paid out.
So does Immune DeFi, how do they raise the funds to pay that out? Is it a DAO? Is it a token? Is it like insurance? Do you know?
I believe. One moment, sorry. Let me just pull it up really quick.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I definitely think that you know, if it's just really important for these early projects to have profitable bug bounty programs, so the attacker can, you know, have an option here, because it's kind of important that stuff like this gets found, and it probably would have been found sooner or later, no matter what. And I think at least it was only a few million rather than tens of or hundreds.
It could have been so much worse, but at least we found it. We came together as a community, and we're going to resolve this thing as a family.
Do we want to keep talking about this, or do we want to move on?
We can move on. I'm down for that.
What about the governance? Do we have some news about like the governance numbers and how is it going?
Yeah, when payouts should be starting right now, right?
Yeah, the payouts are from January 1st to the 5th. And I think the sign-up period ends on the 7th. So I think because of this latest development with Tinyman, a lot more, I expected less to go into governance this period and more to go into DeFi, but this might change things and people might be a little bit more conservative with their funds right now. Rather than going into ASAs, they might go just to the reliability of governance. What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, without an exchange, there's very little speculation to be done in the ASAs right now. So I see a lot of the speculating hot money just dumping, going right into Algo, which honestly is a smart play. Like, so I can't, talk down on them or anything. If you're worried about maintaining your bag, just sit in Algo. It's not going to get rugged from you.
Yeah, I want to agree with John on this. I think that NFTs and until another, DeFi, something alternative to Tinyman comes, I think we're going to be in a pickle until they fix these contracts and restart the pools or whatever. So, yeah.
Jeff, don't you think that without Tinyman, the NFT market might see a residual like downstream boom from this, because the funds could be used in NFTs rather than.
I'll be honest with you, I'm seeing it already. Like, people are already shifting towards that. I mean, it happened within the last 24 hours, obviously, but I think it was happening before because people were waiting for their governance bags to unlock. People that I were talking to were making offers like, hey, like, wait till January 1st. I'll pick this up or pick that up. So it was going to happen either way, but I think more so now.
I wonder, people who have been involved in other ecosystems, has anyone ever seen or lived through like another of these type of situations, maybe on Ethereum or Solana? And like, kind of how did that community deal with it, and kind of what lessons can we learn like from that, positive and negative?
I would say that one thing that's been shown time and time again is that things like this don't affect the price of the actual underlying token, because the reason for this is I believe that most of the people in the space right now are in the innovator section, which innovator section of users really expect things like this to happen. So there's really not going to be a hit in the actual, shouldn't be a hit in the actual overall price. I think that things like this are actually really good, because what happens is that we learn more as a community. This is a wake up call. Make sure that people don't overstretch or overreach or their own finances. Luckily for many of the retail users, like, this didn't hit them that hard because they weren't staking their liquidity. But this should be like, this is a learning experience, and the community will become tighter because we've experienced pain and we've gotten through it. So that's also super important. And hopefully runtime verification or auditors will now know to be able to focus on this specific exploit. That being said, there's going to be more, and we're going to learn from those as well. But we're in this because we're early. We're not in this because we're wanting to use the most stable, secure things in the entire world. So, I mean, if this doesn't bring us closer and a better community, it's on us.
So, Chris, I just want to say one thing about this subject. The liquidity that's still existing within the Tinyman pools. I've spoken to several projects at this point, and I've suggested that they pull their liquidity, but some are hesitant for some reason. And I'm just trying to understand, like, why anybody would still keep their project's liquidity locked up at this point. Like,
I would say
how
that
could they justify that?
The big reason why I would think, I mean, obviously I can't speak for them because I'm not them, but one of the things that they might be scared of is signaling a rug pull. That's, the liquidity pools are the only really real way for people to buy the token or be able to transact the token. And by removing that, they could scare off their community members. They might be thinking, if you remember the movie Forrest Gump with the shrimp boats, if we weather the storm and they're only been weather the storm, we'll come out on top. But there could be a lot of things. I personally would recommend, and not me personally, and Tinyman and all the liquidity providers, the institutional liquidity providers, recommend pulling out liquidity. But this is a decentralized world, and people aren't forced to do anything. So whatever people want to do, they can do.
Definitely not the way we imagined going into 2022. I want to pose the question to anybody who's in the audience. Regardless of this, how do you guys see the ecosystem developing throughout this year? And what are your biggest what are your biggest desires to see growth in? That was a poorly worded question, but to rephrase it, what would you guys like to see grow the most in the Algorand ecosystem this year?
I'll speak first, waiting for other people to jump in. But the truth is like this is a minor blip on 2022. I know personally several amazing companies that are launching in 2022 and early 2022. And I actually know a bunch of other projects that are just starting that will probably launch at the end of 2022. I am extremely bullish on the utility of Algorand this year. And you know what? If you squint real hard, I can actually see this latest thing as actually a benefit. So I still extremely bullish, if not even more, than I was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I personally think we're gonna just kind of laugh about this later. It sucks. Like it's one of those things you hate to see. You really hate to see it. But I mean, this is just growing pains for the network. And like in the grand scheme of things, like I keep saying, this was such a small hack, especially in monetary value. I mean, we could be like the Poly network, which is still like the largest hack in history. So let's just be grateful that it was found in such an early stage in our network. This could have went like unsolved for a long time until Tinyman had like, $500 million worth of liquidity on there. Can you imagine what kind of devastation that would have brought us? So yeah, I'm just kind of glad this happened so early, and great learning experience for the network.
I wouldn't be so rosy about it, but yeah, no, I mean, I think that we'll see a lot worse than this. Like, there's still like really bad shit happening on other networks that have been, developing a lot longer, right? Like ETH came out in 2015, yet you still see scams on there every single day. It's not like the more developed, these contracts get, the more we're going to be able to trust them. So there's still a lot of development to go on in the Algorand ecosystem, and there's probably going to be a lot more of this. So definitely do your own research. You cannot stress that enough if you're new into crypto. And take all the necessary, precautions, protecting yourself, not over leveraging, because stuff like this happens all the time.
If you haven't read Kyle W's Twitter thread this morning, you should. It's help you think and see clearer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's been great to see the community come together at this time, because we all initially believe in Algorand. We've read the white papers, or at least for us, that can understand it as software engineers or not. It's great to see, this community come together at this. I think difficult time, but also great learning experience, and we can only go up from here in trust and transparency.
I just wanted to chime in on one other thing. The fact that I had some friends looking at the wallet activity, and they were basically saying that they touched, like, whoever this hacker was that did the exploit, he was looking at doing this 170 days ago. So like they knew about this and they waited for this particular time to take advantage of the exploit. That's what I'm reading from some friends looking at the history of the wallet and all that.
Yeah, I heard that as well. I think like this was a perfect time to attack during New Year's when basically no one is working.
I mean, one of the plus things that's I would say coming out of this is that this should be a wake up call to all of the DeFi projects out there, or just all the projects on disaster reaction type of plans. So if something like this happens, how can you respond appropriately? How the best to communicate? do what it'll make everybody think about it for sure.
Yeah, even on like the users about their own asset management, but also when these new DeFi systems come out, besides Tinyman, that we're able to distribute our assets accordingly and not have a single point of failure, basically.
To Chris's point, last night it was me, him, Evan, and a bunch of other people talking to the community. Well, JT Invest as well. John was there. A bunch of other people were talking about this at 1 a.m. And I mean, yeah, that's definitely something about crisis management. It's a very small space. It's growing fast, but definitely for all the projects, you guys should plan for the worst case scenario.
Yeah, nothing, no company, no government, no group can go forever without encountering some critical issue which will test them to their core. That's the reason why we have a war room, like if with the U.S. government or any government has that war room that, when things get really hot, they got to go in there and figure it out. The judgment comes upon how the problem is dealt with, and not necessarily how the exploit happened in the first place, or how the problem arose in the first place, because problems will always arise. But it's really, how can you move? How can you grow? If everyone gets refunded for this exploit that happened, and it can be smoothed out within a respectable time frame, it probably will just be something that we look back on in a few years, like, remember that? Like, wasn't that a crazy time? And things might seem a little sweeter, but right now it stings for people, especially who got hit, because people providing liquidity in those pools, the Go Bitcoin, Go ETH pools, we're doing a really important service, and they were doing something that was necessary to try to help grow the ecosystem. And it's just it's unfortunate that those pioneers, those people who are willing to be brave in that new asset class of Go BTC and Go ETH, and on a new technology like Tinyman, a lot of respect to them, and it's really unfortunate. Like, they're the biggest losers here, of course. Does anyone know how Tinyman is going to refund these people, or when? Have they shared any details, or they just said they would?
They just said they would.
Post from Borderless Capital on Twitter referencing Tinyman, so I think they might be involved somehow.
I mean, I don't know how that would happen. Yeah, nobody said exactly how, and it doesn't really matter exactly how yet. I mean, I'm pretty sure 90% of the loss is between just a couple people. So it'll be up to them to figure that out.
I just had a quick question about the difference between Teal 3. I know Tinyman is running on Teal 3 contracts and Teal 5. Would Teal 5 fix something like this?
Yeah, and there's probably a lot of people who can talk about it, but I think the biggest issue prior to Teal 4 is Teal 3 doesn't support loops or subroutines. So basically everything has to always jump forward. And then combined with total program size, you're gonna have to get pretty creative and with how you structure the code. Starting with like Teal 4 and above, you can have loops, more generic subroutines. So combined with things like PyTeal, it's much easier to have more composed code that's easier to reason through. But yeah, I think given Teal 3's constraints, we should be glad that they were were first, but they definitely had to do it under difficult circumstances.
Could you elaborate on the looping? Do you mean like recursivity?
Yeah, TL3, you could only all your branch statements. So if you just did like, I'll push asset ID 1, push asset ID 2, then have an equals, and then branch, if not 0, to branch on that equality. You can only ever jump forward. You can never jump backwards in TL3. So you can't even have something like, you couldn't create like a subroutine that says, okay, here's my constraints that I want to apply for lots of different operations. Like here, let's do a sanity check and make sure, this caller called me with these constraints and these assets equal these, these sort of things. Basically, asserts that you'd have for lots of different operations. You could just put that in a subroutine and call it from all the different operations. With TL4, you could do that, or maybe it's even TL. I've kind of lost track of which was basically AVM1. Then you could just have a subroutine for that, call it, and it basically loop back and then return, and then it's just basically the return is on the stack. So you could basically just have a simple subroutine that says, return true or false if these conditions are met, and make that like a precondition for everything you do. Whereas with TL3, it just has to be, you would have to repeat those assertions everywhere, like as you jumped forward, only jumping forward. And then at a certain point, you've got a maximum size you could have, and that also is increased in AVM. You can basically pay extra to have more pages of code. And then before you had a fixed execution cost, like period. Now the execution cost is dynamic based on what actually executes. So it's the AVM 1.0, which I think TL5 was a big upgrade over TL3.
All right, thank you for the explanation.
Hopefully it makes sense.
Does a DeFi protocol have to put their smart contracts out and have them be unalterable, or is that not really necessary? Can they just have can they have a different method where they can update these contracts post release?
Yeah, I mean, in Teal, basically calling an application on Algorand, there's a number of different operations. You can create the application, delete the application, clear its state, opt in, update the application, delete the application. So those are all like operations you accept as a call in the code. So a locked contract, if you look at the Tinyman contract, basically just checks some of those conditions of like, oh, is this a call to update me? Is this a call to delete me? Anything like that, and it just says fail. It just rejects it. So that's in a sense a locked contract. Now they don't, obviously they could have made it so they could update the contract, but my guess, and Chris might speak with this, because I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect because it is a protocol acting as a asset exchange, basically taking parties, and it's basically acting as a financial arbiter and middleman and exchanging these assets. If they had those contracts such that they were upgradable, then that would potentially expose them to liability, where they're like, hey, here's this central authority who's truly in charge of this thing, and all these operations, all these assets that are moving back and forth is on them. And then now we expect them to be treated as like a regulated exchange. That's kind of my take on it. And that's why, at least particularly for things like AMMs or DEXs, why, locked contracts make sense.
Right. I mean, it makes sense. You want to make sure it's trustless, so you want to publish those smart contracts and leave them as is. But now there's no way for the team at Tinyman to move quickly and update
Yeah,
they're
100%.
already existing protocols. So now they have to deal with the unfortunate reality of having to convince people to migrate to a new version of their protocol.
It's a hard fork basically. It'll be, you know, contract V2, and there'll be all new liquidity pools for the new contracts. And so I think that's it. If they aren't legally required, you know, for the financial aspects I mentioned to lock them, you know, that's the risk. I mean, software, you know, humans make mistakes. There's a lot of eyes looked at those contracts, and it got missed by a lot of people. And it's easy to look at it after the fact and go, "Oh my God, that's so easy. It's so obvious." But obviously, it wasn't, because a lot of people missed it. But I think that's, you know, reality is humans make mistakes. Software has bugs, and it's you kind of want to make it so that you can fix those bugs. And if the regulations are such that they're basically forced into making the contracts locked, that's unfortunate. But, you know, at the same time, contracts that can be changed is an additional trust issue for the community, because the contracts could be changed and you wouldn't necessarily know it. But I would still argue that there's always a matter of trust, right? And that's why it's important to also have non-anonymous teams for these sort of projects, because people using Tinyman to begin with, it's not like the users actually went through and read all the smart contract code for everything. You know, I'm sure maybe some did, but the majority didn't. So there's already some level of trust there. And so if you're trusting that team, the trust that's not anonymous, that is known, that is funded, that has gone through audits, is doing basically, you know, obvious due diligence, then I would think you would also be able to trust them that if they needed to update the contracts, it was done for the right reasons.
So, Patrick, you know, I disagree with this. So I'll say something as well.
Absolutely.
I'm of the other side that I don't ever agree with upgradable contract. I won't say ever. Most of the time, for a decentralized application, it should not have unlocked or upgradable contracts. And for this reason is that what that does is it's a backdoor into every protocol that is upgradable. It's another attack vector. Now, to kind of push back on the whole, like, oh, well, there needs to be a little bit of trust. Well, the thing with a locked contract is that the trust is there right away, that really only one person needs to actually look at it and look through it and raise the actual red flag and say, hey, this contract is not good. But an upgradable contract, what could happen is 10 years down the line, when there's $1 trillion of money on, like, locked into the actual contract, it has a back door that whoever actually ends up getting that key can then upgrade the contract to siphon all of the money out. And that is a lot of trust.
I mean, for me, I think it ultimately comes down to some balance of risk versus reward for the two competing effects of, you know, trusting, like, the core developer team, as well as it's like trusting that, you know, there won't be a rug, which in this case there never would be, or, you know, missing something in the, you know, in the code. So honestly, I think each situation is, like, fairly idiosyncratic and sort of depends on your assessment of the risks for each of those categories. And I think in, like, the deal world right now, given that all the teams are doxed, I think the risks still lie on the code having flaws more so than teams trying to you know, use those powers for bad.
I just want to point out, they posted an official announcement from Tinyman directly. They're saying hopefully within the week.
This just came out?
Correct. I posted a few minutes ago when you guys were talking, but it should be in the pinned on the chat.
Yeah, I read that a little bit ago. Now, I agree with that. You know, there's going to be bugs with the code, and making it upgradable is one way to go at it. But another option, of course, is building into your architecture smooth migration paths. making it very easy make it easy for the developer or the users to migrate from one contract to another, rather than making them upgradable. And I mean, it's not. I don't even really see it as like trusting the developers. I mean, sure, even like a Docs developer, but if you guys, I don't know how many people are here for a while, but there was a VC that was their keys were taken probably about a year and a half ago, and we 100% trusted them and all the work that they did. It has nothing to do with them being bad people or anything of that sort. It's just that it's an extra attack vector when it comes to keys.
What requires more trust from the community? Having migratable paths to bring a protocol from V1 to V2, or just upgradable smart contracts? Either way, you still have to trust the devs that if they take that path of easy migration instead of upgradable smart contracts, that the new smart contracts are upgraded and more secure.
Yeah, I mean, the upgradable path.
Sorry, I cut off there. Yeah, go ahead.
The upgradable path, the users don't get to decide if they want them upgraded or not. So the developers can decide whenever they're going to actually swap out the contracts with the new contracts that could say anything, with a smooth process that allows for the user to migrate in an easy way, that ends up being up to the developers if they want to make that step.
So can I just interject here and kind of look at how this is going to play out over the next 3-4 days, week, etc. I'm looking at the top liquidity pools right now. There's 300K, 500K, 200K, 50K, whatever the numbers are. All of that's going to need to be reset. There's going to have to be a pool migration. Are they going to incentivize people to migrate? Like, it's all exploitable at this point, right? So it's just there for the taking. So like this should be kind of more urgent. I mean, like I sense urgency here, but I feel like it should be up a notch of what it is, for some people. Not to sell, just to remove the liquidity.
I mean, that's a Tinyman question. Who knows what they're going to want to do or even how they're going to do it. So I have no idea.
Yeah, I think, if you look at like historical examples of like liquidity migration, when Uniswap launched their V3, I don't think they incentivized it, but it actually took a very long time. I think in this case, most of the liquidity, yeah, there's still a bunch. So even though I love V3, the concept, that's besides the point. I think that like most of the liquidity is migrated off, so I don't know if they'll necessarily need to incentivize it, but they are part of the Aeneas program. I guess that could be one thing to do there. But I'm hoping that mostly they just like take it off their UI eventually after most of the liquidity has come off.
Well, it also depends, to answer your question, Jeff, on which pools can actually be affected and which pools are profitable to do this exploit on. The double-edged sword of information being proliferated on Reddit and Discord and Telegram is that anyone who's a bad actor can also learn the same thing. So I woke up this morning and I saw on, I think it was the subreddit Algorand ASA, that someone put together a spreadsheet of every single pool that could be affected and the ratio of reward and a lot of details on all this stuff, which is great to know. If you're part of those pools, you can pull out liquidity, but if you didn't see that post, you might be, it's easier than ever, and it's getting simpler for potential attackers to use all this info and just jump straight to the point. So I think the incentive right now for people is Tinyman doesn't necessarily need to put out an incentive to move to their V2 when they come out with it. The incentive is to pull your liquidity from the pool if you think that you may not want to lose it and it could be at risk. So I think people, if you're listening to this right now, go check out that subreddit. If you're still supplying liquidity, check out that list. I can try to find the link and drop it in the chat. And yeah, just be aware of what's going on.
The other thing to actually keep in mind is, I believe, and maybe somebody else can actually correct me if I'm wrong, is that if with everybody that is removing liquidity and is bringing down the actual total liquidity of these pools, it pushes it towards the other bug that was already discovered with Tinyman of the low liquidity pools, where there's a chance that if there's a large majority of people move it and you keep it in, it might actually lock the pool completely where you will never be able to get your money out. But can anybody confirm that?
Yeah, I mean that was flagged by Tinyman, I think a few weeks ago, roughly a month ago. So yeah, I think it's in the very small liquidity pools where the ratio of assets, base units, can be manipulated very quickly. That could certainly happen. So, you basically need to pull your liquidity out before it's too small, and one trade could disable the pool effectively.
Right. So don't be stubborn, everybody. Take your liquidity out, please.
From what I read, the attacker chose Go ETH and Go BTC against Algo because of the decimal places. Is that the case, or is it any ASA over the Algorand asset value?
I want to wait for the dev team at Tinyman to give their full report, but I was thinking about the type of exploit that could have been done here, and I was looking at the transactions that were sent against the smart contracts, and my hypothesis is that the exploit, and this is not like advice from the Tinyman team, so take it with a grain of salt, but if there's a faulty check on the transaction type, so for example, if you're not checking that it's an asset transfer transaction versus a payment transaction, additionally, if you're not checking the asset ID so that you're withdrawing the correct asset, that can allow you to withdraw, any generic asset from the pool. And so what happened in one of the transactions was, instead of withdrawing 31 algos, which has a base decimals of 6, they were able to withdraw 0.31 Bitcoin, which has a base decimals of 8. So it was essentially 31 divided by 100 amount of Bitcoin they were able to withdraw, which made it highly profitable. But I'm now reading online that it affects the ASA versus ASA pools as well. So it may not be just a algo versus ASA transaction type. It might be something involving ASAs as well.
Yeah, I think that the decimal point thing really only comes into play with the floating point math does, right? Because of how you remove all of those decimal points to do the actual math. So it would make it easier if there's actually a difference in decimal points. But yeah, the big thing here is the difference in value between the two tokens.
And for this difference in value, exactly what's the difference that needs to be met for two assets to be at risk?
I mean, literally any difference, right?
So if there's any difference in value, so basically almost any pool besides stablecoins can be affected by this.
The thing is, like, there's more incentive for a larger difference, but I mean, all you're doing is you're swapping one for the other. So there's definitely some incentive for anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to kind of go through it in depth, but it does seem like even if they were the exact same number of decimals, if it's an even swap or something, that's far more. I mean, in some ways, the fact that there was more decimals for Go BTC and Go ETH meant they got less on the exchange, but it's just worth so much. It still was very profitable. If it had the same number of decimals, they would have gotten even more. Does that sound correct, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that. But by the way, like, this 100% has the potential to cause ripples. I mean, this, like, being able to exploit these things allows you to exploit other things, and it could have a cascading effect. So I would make sure that, like, take your liquidity out, guys.
I think, yeah, if you go to Tinyman's site now, they have a very obvious message, basically warning to withdraw liquidity from all Tinyman pools. And if you go to analytics, it's down to what, 3.9 million. So it's getting pulled pretty aggressively.
So when humble,
one thing that Tinyman hasn't said yet, or talked about yet, is what happened to the other side of the pools. I think all the pools that have been exploited are completely hosed now, aren't they? Because it screwed up the math.
I would assume so.
So that's the other thing too, is like, even if they stole a lot, the other side of the algos that are locked in might be locked in forever.
Imbalanced. Yeah.
But the ratio of algo they need is significantly lower than the value that they took, right? I heard that the original exploiter took a balance of $150 of algo, which is about 86 or 88 algo yesterday, and were able to start this kind of exponential effect where they could do this exploit with a smaller amount and got a bigger reward, swapped back to algo, and were able to just compound and multiply until they were taking huge chunks of the pool at a certain time. So it would be less algo than millions of dollars worth. That would, if it were to be a kind of vanishing in these pools.
I mean, I didn't fully understand what you were saying there, but yeah, because how pools work is that there's a balance, and if there's $2-3 million worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum siphoned out of it, there would have to be $2-3 million of algo also in those pools. And if the math is now out of sync, can the algo ever be taken out of those pools, or is that algo now gone forever as well? Like, that's the question I was asking.
And how do the oracles tie into this whole thing? Because the prices of these assets were way off the peg for certain periods of time yesterday. What's going on with the oracle feeds there? Are they just getting, how did they get thrown off so heavily? Anybody want to take this one?
I don't fully understand what you're saying, but Tinyman doesn't use oracles. It's an AMM, so it just uses a equation to determine what the price is, unless you mean somebody else using the pricing price feeds from Tinyman. And if that's the case, yes, that could have had a cascading effect, but I'm not sure anybody actually uses the price feeds from Tinyman as an oracle. Does anybody know what they are?
I mean, some sites will have to, right? Like if you have like tax reporting sites, and people are doing swaps in Tinyman, they're going to have to basically pull price data from Tinyman. And if you get some arbitrary ASA versus another ASA, there has to be some way to price that.
Some of the only sites that could be affected by this are the charting websites. Greg, I don't know if he's still here, but no, go ahead.
So the question was, is anybody using the Tinyman price feeds right now? I don't know if Algofam is or not, but I can't think of anybody else other than like Tiny Chart, which that shouldn't be a big issue.
Yeah, I don't know, like if Coinly or other tax, crypto tax sites are using it yet, but they would be or should be at some point. So there could be an impact there, but people would be able to fix those transactions manually later if need be, or resync possibly. Somewhat jumping rails. Is anyone confirmed? So there was mention that the hacker had used Lofty. Has that actually been confirmed? Because if that's the case, they're doxxed.
That's what the rumor is.
That would be awesome.
It would be, yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Actually, I saw a thread on this. I want to speak on this. There's been, throughout this whole thing, there's actually been a lot of misinformation. Very, very unfortunately so. There's been a ton on like Reddit, Discord, Twitter, from I think just like frantic users trying to like help out the situation, but perhaps non-technical users. And like, so the hacker account does not have Lofty AI tokens as far as I know, although I saw someone mention that. And then they were actually, the only reason why I feel so strongly about this is they were also discussing the Algofam protocol creator account as being potentially involved in the situation, which is ludicrous. They I think the hacker had like opted into some assets on our protocol, which involve some of our addresses. But clearly we're not. So that's just something that happens with all users, though. So, anyways, the general comment, I think, I don't think anything happened regarding Lofty, and I think there's just generally been like a lot of misinformation. So it's important for like the technical people of the Algorand ecosystem to kind of blunt any of this continued chatter.
So yeah, I had read that they had used Algofy as kind of their exit strategy. Locking up the GoBTC and ETH.
Yeah.
And borrowing against it for the USDC and cash out
What
that way.
they managed to get their ETH in, and the GoBTC cap was actually hit by a whale earlier in the morning, so they only got a little bit of Bitcoin in, and then they've borrowed 250,000 USDC so far and shipped that to KuCoin. But
Got it. So
that's
ultimately, yeah, they won't repay it. It could get liquidated and get returned in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. So their plan is just to send it to a centralized exchange, wash it, and then they will not be repaying their loans, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'd be curious if people people are trying to follow transactions, went a little too far into some kind of decentralized protocol and thought that was the hacker's wallet or something.
Yeah, the hacker currently has 21 GoBTC in their wallet, so they're kind of thinking about what to do with that. Most of the hack is still sitting in their wallet, doing nothing.
Got it. And so so basically they use an exchange as their seeding source, and there's no other inputs into that account from other.
Yeah, so like the situation
so they're clean
is they can't do anything with that GoBTC unless they use the GoBTC bridging process. But I imagine, Copper could flag that, if this address is now known to have exploited GoBTC, since that's a centralized process, something could be done there.
Yeah, GoBTC does not have freeze enabled, so they can't freeze it either.
Yeah, but they could you have to send the GoBTC to a custodian, and then that custodian sends Bitcoin to the wallet. They could just say, we're not going to accept transactions emerging from this. Like, we're just going to seize the GoBTC.
Just put that. Well, but they'd have to blocklist it transitively. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you guys hear me? My Twitter keeps crashing on me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So you might have answered this already. But is this Algofy, is this preventing you guys from raising the cap? Because couldn't they just throw the GoBTC in your guys' contracts?
So the caps are actually mostly around liquidity in the ecosystem. we have to use centralized exchanges now to run the liquidation process, and anyone in the open source community that's using our Python SDK needs to do that because we don't have a native DEX. So we won't be able to raise the caps until we have more liquidity on chain.
Yeah. So like my point of like, couldn't they just hold the GoBTC, the wallet, until you guys do raise the caps, and then just throw it on your books, and then lend off of that, and then with the algo that they borrow off or their stable coin, they can do what they want then?
Yeah, they could do that. There's nothing that can be done about that situation. They're using our protocol completely soundly, essentially.
Yeah. So like that. So that'd be a worry because you guys don't have any type of a whitelist or a blacklist on your smart contracts, right?
No.
I mean, they'd be able to get around with it pretty easily anyway by just transferring it to a different wallet. So that's a current worry, is that if we don't somehow catch the exploiter before then, they have the ability to then use the other protocols to kind of wash the money to still get it off.
Yeah, it becomes a philosophical discussion at that level. How much intervention is appropriate, what is too centralized and potentially a bad look for the community downstream, what can be done, now to, so it's a bit of a judgment call. We are really lucky though. I mean, this attack could have been. It almost leads me to believe that there's something we don't know about the hacker circle that conducted this. This hack seems to have been done so prematurely because we were about to launch our rewards program on Algofy, which, if you kind of see the activity that happened on Avalanche after their rewards and then on Algorand after their rewards program, rewards just tend to work and motivate tens to hundreds of millions of TVL to come into the ecosystem. This hack could have been to the tune of 20, 30, 40, 50 mil if the attacker waited an additional month or so. So leads me to believe that this exploit's been known for quite a while, and perhaps this hacker wanted to get out in front of the exploit, and perhaps a few people knew about this.
Yeah,
I
Bitcoin.
think, yeah, but or just taking advantage of the time when knowing people weren't going to be available to potentially lock things down if it was even possible.
Yeah, because it was essentially, they might have known that the dev team was asleep, because the attack started when it was roughly nighttime in the Euro area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on that because we were talking about that last night. The same thing. I think they timed it for New Year's Day. Two things: bigger bounties generally in the ecosystem. I feel like if this is a $5, $10, $20 million exploit, like where are the $100,000, $500,000, $1 million bounties? Like who's going to put that up? If whoever it is, the other, the big VCs want to fix this, I mean, shouldn't they be proactive and put out bigger bounties? So that's one point I wanted to make. And secondly, the Go BTC and the Go ETH. Can you guys explain like the nature of that like contract? Like, so is that immutable as well? Like the Bitcoin that's locked, like that paired with it, it's like it's there and you can't change the nature of that, right? Explain that a little more for me.
I actually don't know the full technical details of how the process has been implemented on their side, but my understanding is it's done off-chain in a centralized fashion, and the cryptos are stored at Copper. So I'm not sure if a smart contract is necessarily used. It could be as simple as you are sending Bitcoin to Copper, and an event listener, perhaps implemented in like JavaScript or something, is waiting for that Bitcoin to come in from a wallet, and then the GoBTC are sent, using the ALGO SDK to the destination wallet on the Algorand blockchain.
So it's a cold storage solution. Is there insurance on that? Is there some sort of process that if we can confirm this is stolen funds, are they able to basically invalidate those Go BTC? Is that like an option here?
So that's what I was saying before. Whereas if it's like an on-chain solution, it's very hard to do something about it. However, there is precedent for, like, for example, if Circle knew that there was like a hacker or terrorist organization wallet, and it was known and guaranteed, they would likely intervene and do something to prevent those funds from being useful. Similarly, something could be done here with Copper to blacklist that wallet, make sure that the funds come in but then get seized and then dealt with in another way. So that's kind of, it's not, if it the process is mediated in the way that I expect it is.
Got it.
What are people's thoughts on basically decentralized insurance? I know there's some things in Ethereum that I haven't really dug in too deeply, but it'd be interesting to think of if you had DeFi protocols basically where there is in a sense of a payout per transaction into a separate insurance policy that I don't know whether that paid out rewards for white hats or basically to compensate victims. It's just be interesting to think of, because I think there's always going to be exploits, but it's a matter of how that could be handled in a decentralized manner. It's an interesting thought experiment.
I had a friend just get into the Algorand ecosystem. He really loved the fluidity of the DeFi, and it's a very sticky ecosystem. But he said two things. He said, first of all, what you said, the insurance. He's like, look, I need insurance if I'm going to put XYZ amount, and I don't trust appropriately the smart contract. If it's solid. So he made those 2 points. He still put a decent amount of money, but it's like, those are two big things that need to be addressed before more money comes on chain.
There have also been some issues with decentralized insurance protocols. Like, I think the one on Ethereum is called Nexus Mutual. Like most traditional insurance companies, there's this moral hazard. Well, there's moral hazard on the part of the insurance purchaser, but then the insurers try to avoid paying out claims. And so I think there's been an issue on the Ethereum blockchain where, the stakers on the protocol do better by not paying out on claims. So I think that, that game theoretic phenomenon has caused issues with it actually being an effective way to compensate victims of hacks. So I think there basically needs to be like a better system designed in order to motivate, efficient and correct usage of insurance on chain.
The issue is, how do you reward people for taking part in that protocol? Did they get rewarded for issuing insurance or withholding payment? It's like, if you reward people with a governance token for, the thing about insurance claims is that they're each case by case, and it's really difficult to get a whole group of people to decide on something if there's monetary incentive involved as well. Wouldn't there be? I think the Algorand community could do well to create like I mentioned it earlier, but a DAO for bug bounties. So people just contribute for the greater health of the ecosystem, and create a pool for any major protocol hack. The exploit would be matched either in full or in part by the DAO.
That's a brilliant idea.
Well, it's like, in theory, it sounds good, but in implementation, would it be doable? How much could a DAO raise? how do the voters in the DAO determine which projects deserve deserve a insurance by this DAO? You know, Chris McCluskey, can I rope you in here? You're a DAO guy. Wondering if you've ever seen or heard of something like this, and do you think it's possible?
Hey, sorry, my connection was chopping out a little bit. Can you kind of summarize the question?
I said, what if there was a DAO for pooling capital to create bug bounty payouts? And like, is that a thing that's been done? How do you think that could be implemented? Just to, you know, get a community funded insurance going for some of these very early DApps on Algo.
Yeah, I can't think of the closest thing I can think of that's been successful is Immunify, that I believe currently only is operating on Ethereum or EVM projects, but it's been really successful. Like a bug bounty program, I think they've moved like 10 million in bounties have been paid out or more. So we could get some, like, I'm sure they would be interested in moving over to Algorand if there was enough development, which I feel there is. So we could reach out to them or spin up something internally, like you say, which is a little more focused on teal and bring in all of the teal experts somehow. But yeah, I like that idea.
The question is how you prevent people from gaming it.
Yeah, or how do you create an incentive for people to actually pay into this eventual bounty program? Like, who pays for it, hypothetically? Is it just an altruistic thing? Because if so, I mean, it might be hard to convince the big projects. Well,
the cleanest way that Immunify has been doing it is the projects are the ones paying out. Like the projects in aggregate have paid 10 million to participants on Immunify, which has been probably the most successful way. I don't know if it would be hard to. I'd have to think about it a little bit more.
I mean, I'll just make it simple. You get whatever VCs are investing in the Algorand ecosystem to put up a certain amount each, and you know, give it over to the DAO and let the trusted people, you know, have a multi-sig, you know, 6, 7, 8 people, whoever it is, the top teal experts, pi teal, whoever, and you know that's how you do it. You create that type of DAO.
But then, how do you decide like which exploit is worth which monetary amount, sort of in the best way possible, and how do you decide who gets to like participate into this pool and which claims should be paying out? Like, how do you create the incentive for the DAO to pay out the claims to the bug finder, and how do you make sure that the bug finder has the incentive to essentially go to the DAO first instead of exploiting it for his own personal gain? So it's a very, very hard thing to balance, in my opinion. Like, for example, in this case, you would have to have had like the DAO give away, I mean, at least half of what the Go BTC or the Go ETH the person took in order for them to go through the DAO route instead of just exploiting it.
Couldn't you bring that person on board, though, possibly, and turn them?
Of course, I mean, you can always rely sort of on the good nature and the essentially like make it seem to them that it's going to be easier to just report the bug because they'd be able to get a payday sort of like easier. But it's a balancing act. I mean, at the end of the day, if the payout is big enough, then the incentive to go through the DAO instead of just through the exploit is not really there. It's really hard.
What if independent programmers got rewarded for taking part in verification of other projects' code, and if they were to find exploits or things that needed fixing, you know, they got a greater say in the DAO. And as people build credibility in that system, a natural creation of like the top builders, the top independent auditors are, you know, they rise to the top in the system. And I don't know, is that possible? I think that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. I mean, the only problem is that then you have sort of like a hierarchy problem, and you have the idea, like as you said, the top builders start rising up the ranks and they start becoming more trustful, and then like you'll get the one agent that breaks sort of ranks and will essentially come across a problem that he might not raise flags on because he knows that he can get the sort of like the big end all pay all. It's a very, very hard problem. Like it really is not like I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm sure that someone way smarter than me can come up with sort of like a solution, but it's a bit of a tough one to crack, in my opinion.
Because teams could actually even basically, through the third parties, claim bug bounties against their own code, which they already, potentially even left there to be able to claim those additional funds.
Yeah, like I hadn't even considered that sort of situation, and you're 100% right.
Yeah, exactly. People could game it and intentionally, leave flaws in their contracts knowingly, and then have, a third party they interact with claim the bug bounty, and then they share the rewards.
And if the bug bounty is huge, then the payout should like correspond. So essentially, they could socially drain the funds from the DAO.
Yeah, it's a very, very hard problem.
Yeah, that's what the cleanest way seems to be the projects putting up larger bug bounties, so then they wouldn't game it themselves, and just have like a central place, like what Immunify is doing. A single hacker or a programmer or like a team could just focus on getting big bounties, while also being audited by. Like, we're also pretty early here, so hopefully we'll have more auditing firms just to be more experienced, and these things kind of have to happen this early, I guess, unfortunately.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, the newness of the platform brings with it the idea that like there's not a lot of code bases to look at, there's not a lot of best practices to look at, there's not a lot to see that's already been built, so everything has to kind of be done sort of from scratch, which in that like unavoidably will bring issues like this. Like one thing that I know for sure is that this won't be sort of like the first big problem that Algorand will have as an ecosystem, just because it's so new. But one of the really sort of like encouraging things is to see the overall community response to this whole problem and sort of closing ranks and trying to like figure out what went wrong and trying to build from it. I think that's admirable. And I'm sure like the folks over at Tinyman will do like great work, sort of like with their second version of the contracts.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. I was reading over the security audit for the Tinyman ecosystem here, and there's a part called AO3 in it, draining of pool funds due to missing group size checks. I don't know if this was talked about earlier, came in a bit late.
Yes, it seems all bit...
here. Yeah, so the status says this issue has been fully addressed. If it was fully addressed, how was that fixed? If there's anybody from the Tinyman team here to explain
that wasn't the issue. That wasn't the issue, though.
It wasn't the issue? So what was the actual issue then? Does anybody know that has that been already addressed?
There's basically a way of tricking it into swapping, or it thinks it's basically swapping the same asset. So there's supposed to be basically two assets for the pool, and so
easily explain it maybe. Okay, so Bunsen, you can go because you're the most knowledgeable with this.
When you do a burn call into the contract, usually the burn call implies that the protocol will pay you part of one asset and another part of the second asset, the burn of the LP tokens. Somehow the exploiter managed to get the burn call to return both sides of the ratio of the same asset. Like it seems to be that the problem is on the burn call. The transaction
issue.
So
that was I totally agree with you, but that's actually inside of the audit report for Tinyman to actually fix in their code. So did they actually fix it, or did they just push it on and go, okay, well, whatever? Because it says here the status in the actual document that's online. It was actually posted by someone named Algofam, So props to him for posting that out. But if it was, like it says here that the issue has been fully addressed. If they fully addressed it, because what you're saying here is exactly what's in this audit report. So like I agree with you guys, but it seems here that it wasn't really Teal. It was the developers that actually added this into had this in their code. It had been notified to them to fix it. And
unless I'm
they
wrong,
didn't.
isn't that like isn't the AO3 the transaction group checker, which essentially just says like make sure that every time you call these functions that you're calling 4 transactions or 5 transactions respectively.
Yeah, so like in the actual document, the recommendation is add a group size check that asserts that the exact expected size of the transaction group to every execution path corresponding to the affected operations: minting, burning, swapping, redeeming, and redeeming of fees. A natural location for these checks is the pool_logic sig contract. The status on it says the issue has been fully addressed. So I don't really think like it's the language of Teal. I think it's actually the developers that just didn't know.
But
the
that part
effect was the same. But the thing they
Had it brought out
suggested,
to them, but they actually didn't fix it. So is that true? Is there anybody from Tinyman here?
There's no one from Tinyman that I'm aware of, but like that part was fixed. Essentially, the problem is on the logic of what we seem to think the problem is. We have to wait, of course, until Tinyman releases their postmortem and sort of their technical details on this. Seems to be on the logic of the execution of the burn. Essentially, it seems like it doesn't check whether or not the assets that are being returned when it burns are the same. So you can get back sort of two times one side of the pool, if that like makes any sense.
I think the issue is a combination of a logic sig and the application call. The logic sig, one of the first things it does is it asserts that asset 1 and asset 2, like asset 1, I think that basically that they're different in the logic sig. But then if they don't use that logic sig, then obviously that assert's not going to happen.
Exactly.
So it's it's a nuanced thing. I don't think the group size is the issue.
No, and the group size checks are on the live contracts as well. So like the issue that was raised in that audit was sorted, and it's I think it's one of the first lines in the Teal code, if I remember correctly when I went over it.
Okay, great. Thanks for your information.
So maybe I can go back a little bit to the previous topic because I left the space for a while, and I remember that someone was calling for TinyChart or me or Bunsen, who is my co-founder. What was the topic there?
I think they were talking about whether or not the missing on the peg, the reason why some places were reporting prices that were off peg. And to answer that, essentially after the liquidity was drained from the pool, that meant that the depth of the liquidity was really, really shallow, which leads to very high volatility. So in the case of one pool, I think it was a GoETH, somebody put in a buy order that just made the price of GoETH shoot all the way up. And in the case of GoBTC, somebody made a sell order that made the price of GoBTC shoot all the way down because there was very, very little liquidity in that pool. In fact, at one point, I think there was one screenshot that I didn't verify that showed somebody buying, I think something close to 0.05 Bitcoin with 200 algos. So that just shows how shallow the liquidity pool depth was. So all these price fluctuations could have happened. And if you go to the history of the charts on TinyChart, for example, you can see how you start getting all those crazy candles during the period after the exploit.
Yeah, when I first noticed the liquidity had been pulled from the pools, I was on Tinyman and I went to the Go Bitcoin pair and I typed in from swap to swap from Go Bitcoin to Algo. I typed in 1 Go Bitcoin, and it was worth $35,000 of Algo. And then I just clicked the swap, or like the switch button, and so Algo, it was the swap was from Algo into Go Bitcoin, and then you type in 1 Go Bitcoin, and the price was $150,000 for 1 Go Bitcoin. So it was super 4x spread on just swapping those assets. So yeah, it was really a shocker yesterday.
Yeah, I think the first thing that when we saw sort of our liquidity, well, our reported liquidity dropped so much, I think the first thing that we immediately thought was, what did we do wrong with our platform? Because it was so big. Like, I mean, going especially on a wrapped pool that usually tend to be the ones that have the most liquidity. Wrapped pools and stable pools tend to have a lot of liquidity. So when we saw sort of like that 98, 99% drop, I think we were both sure that it was a problem from our end. And it wasn't until like we sort of like went deep into the chain that we realized sort of like what was happening.
So yeah, crazy way to ring in this new year. But I think start down. The only place you can go is up. And I really love how the community is, it's a very small community, very, very close community. Once you get really down into it, and we came together and, helped each other out, found this exploit within a matter of hours when the Tinyman team was also probably working to find it as well. And everyone came together and helped each other out. So I want to give a shout out to everyone listening for, not freaking out and just trying to help if you could have.
Yeah, to add a bit to that, I think that's sort of like the one message that we could take away from this is just that it's a very new ecosystem, so these type of issues will arise, and it's when you have emblematic responses like the one the whole Algorand community has had with regards to this exploit that you can essentially start building safer and better products for the future. So I think that's just great, and it just reinforces my sort of belief in this ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, I think definitely agree. And a lot of people have said it, but this won't be the first, but we all learn together. We're all pulling in the same direction. That was my favorite thing about going to Decipher, is that everyone there, and a lot of people who were there are also in this chat right now. Everyone was pulling in the same direction. Everyone's energy was really up, really excited. And we got to remember the highs with the lows, they go together.
Oh, and there was also a question regarding how the price is calculated in all of the pool itself. So liquidity is a little bit of a part there, because the price is calculated from the amount of asset 1 to asset 2. So for example, you have 1,000 Go BTC and 1,000 Algo in the pool, then 1 Go BTC would be worth one Algo, because you just divide them each side. And TinyChart does not actually use any Tinyman SDK or Tinyman API. We get all of this data from the blockchain itself. So even if Tinyman had only an error, we would still get the true data there. So there was no way that the wicks or the candles that you're seeing were somehow mismanaged or showing incorrect data. This is, if we try to load this again from the blockchain, you would get the same chart. So just wanted to clarify.
Thanks for that, Greg. Anybody else have anything they want to share? We've been going for an hour and a half. Been super informative chat today. Super different. I mean, this is one of the chats we've had to kind of do a breaking news type of thing. So thanks to all the the news correspondents, otherwise known as devs and community members, who have come in here and kind of gotten this information proliferated. Really, really helpful to everybody. Does anyone have any last things to share? Bilal, Monty, any parting words?
Maybe Monty, you have some questions from YouTube?
Have we lost Monty here?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, I was checking like Tiny Lock. Does anyone knows the team and how it works and how safe it is, etc.?
It's a pretty, well, from what I've said, it's an open source contract. The dev, I don't know him personally, but he open sourced it just to bring in trust to it. The way it works is, if I remember correctly, is that it created an escrow account that would allow the user to claim back the funds after the period of time. I think in these type of situations, a liquidity locker, like for example the one that we're also building over at TinyChart, would be pretty poorly hit, because if there was a contract redeployment, you would have to like redo LP tokens. In essence, the LP tokens that you locked away and don't have access to would be unusable. So that's like a really one of those things that suck when sort of protocols fail like this.
Thank you, Bunzen. Yeah, let's hear from the audience if there is any questions left or any comment. That would be interesting.
Yeah, if you want to jump in here, drop a hand raise emoji. Just scrolling through the chat right now to see if anyone wants to jump in. Can't see anybody. Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, things were getting exciting in the ASA space, and we're just gonna have to take a pause for an indefinite amount of time. I would say probably a week or so, and yeah, until then, I think everyone just let's ride these growing pains, and let's come out smarter, stronger, and let's have a huge 2022, because this is still set up to be a huge year, and this exploit is not changing my opinion on that, and I don't think it should change anybody else's either.
I also have something to say. Also, I think that this speaks on, people need to incentivize more developers. More people should be learning about these languages. Not only that, but after Tinyman fixes this, who's going to audit their new contracts, right? Anyone know?
Most likely runtime verification. I would suspect that since the first audit was with them, the second one would be as well, because they are, after all, the most experienced with those contracts.
This also raises questions too to me. If they miss this, what else may they have missed?
I understand sort of the frustration and anger that people have at the auditors for letting this one slip, but in reality, like the people over at Runtime, they're extremely qualified, and the people over at Tinyman as well. It really comes with sort of the job of working with something as new. I can't stress that enough. I mean, anyone could easily try. Just the dev portal at Algorand is great, but when you look at production-ready code bases, there really aren't many out there. In fact, I think Tinyman was one of the few ones that sort of allowed people to look at their deal contracts and sort of gave a thorough explanation as to which parts do what, and also gave a showcase of their auditing and the processes that the auditor took and everything like that. So they really did take all the steps that you would take when dealing with a project of this magnitude. It's a shame that this and the overflow issue were found, but it really, like, again, it's not a lack of talent, and it's not a lack of work ethic, and it's not a lack of sort of interest to do things right. It comes with new things and pioneering and
Yeah. Also, I think that now people who aren't so technical may want to get involved. Like, what's the support system as far as inside of the ecosystem for people who aren't technical to start getting involved with this? Anyone know?
This is all a bit difficult because in order to get into blockchain development, you need to have some sort of background already in normal programming, right? Because this is like the next step in an advancement of your programming skills. Because it's much more difficult to develop on the blockchain than it is to develop like a website or any other type of app that you can use every day. And the fact that these contracts are going to be forever on the Algorand blockchain also doesn't build many, it doesn't give you much hope, because if you make that mistake, you can't really repair it anyway, unless you implement a backdoor for that, which Tinyman has avoided in order to be fully trustless. So if you want to develop on Algorand, I would suggest just going into the developer portal, and if you have absolutely no experience with programming at all, you can start learning Python and then try writing your smart contracts with PyTeal. And also Reach is very, very, very good, which I'm sure Chris can confirm.
I can confirm that as a user of Reach, I can confirm that even though the compiler is on purpose very mean, it's a really, really good programming language. I really, really like it. I've been working with it for 4 months now, and honestly, like hats off to the team at Reach. And also the developing portal at Algorand. I'd recommend that anyone that's interested on these things start there, because it gives a very, very thorough breakdown of like how the project works and where to start and sort of Teal in general. Things like everything in blockchain, you have to like accustom yourself to the idea that things change.
Did we lose Bunsen?
I think so, because there's an issue with that Twitter app where it keeps kicking people off Spaces sometimes. I have no idea why this happens.
Yeah, Spaces are a bit weird, especially the limited amount of speakers. JC or GC, excuse me, to respond to your question of how can people get involved. I'm also someone who's not a programmer, so what I try to do is just listen and learn and try to listen to the people who can analyze these problems and figure them out down to the technicals. And then once the information comes out, you wield that pen, with the trust that it deserves. We don't want to be spreading misinformation, bad information, spreading FUD. I think that's just in this kind of situation for people who aren't, technical enough to get into the code and read code. It's really about just trying to keep everyone's heads on their torsos, and just be a source of good information, be a source of support and help for people, so we can all band together. And that's really, if this is decentralized, there's no help desk, so that's kind of what this is all about.
I may cut again, but just in case I can't also recommend enough to ask questions, like everywhere you can. Any forum that you participate in, just keep on asking questions, and the people tend to be very friendly. So if you ask away, most people will help.
Yeah, last thing I want to say, I want to really give a thank you to APT 2674 in the Algofam Discord. He was the actual person who looked at the wallet, went through all the transactions, and saw that these Tinyman, Go Bitcoin, Go ETH, and ALGO liquidity pools were being exploited. Also want to give a thank you to Greg and Bunsen for actually looking at the code and realizing what was actually happening. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Thank you, my friend. Yeah, do we have other questions from the audience? And yeah, we really need to make this space open to everybody to ask any kind of question that happened during the week. That's why we meet up every week to make sure that we all can share and use the knowledge of the best developers we have and technical person we have to give the best answer we can. So please just come ahead and ask the questions to Chris, to Patrick, to everybody. Yeah, Falco, how are you doing? Hi, Falco, please. Yeah, go
Hey,
ahead, Falco.
yeah, do you want to go?
Yeah, I appreciate y'all. Thank you for having me up. I wanted to ask, because I'm kind of a little bit late to the conversation, and I guess I heard y'all talking about writing your own smart contracts. So I wanted to ask, I've been shopping around for tokens, and the homie Enver actually in the audience, he told me about Algo, and I've gotten into a couple of rooms now, started talking about it. Him and King Boo Boo was telling me about it. And I wanted to ask, as somebody that does not code as an artist, do you think it's fully necessary for me to learn Python to put my own smart contract, or is there any reputable companies that do codeless uploading for Algo NFTs?
I'm pretty sure you can use Algogems to upload your own NFTs. I think that one is it's currently beta, but I don't think you will need to write any smart contracts just for NFTs. There are multiple platforms already existing to do that.
Okay. Is there anyone that kind of is a little bit more intuitive? I guess I wanted to ask. Like, is there anyone that's codeless that I can do a little bit more with the utility without having to learn Python?
What kind of artist are you? Are you a musician,
Yes.
visual artist,
I'm a musician.
Word. So I'm also a musician, and there's a few platforms that will launch on Algorand later this year that are going to be specifically tailored to musicians and giving musicians options for how to use NFTs. There's Dequency, there's Crescendo, there's Opulus, and probably more NFT marketplaces or NFT listing programs will build out music integration, because I mean, I think it's a lot of people can agree that it's definitely one of the least tapped into markets of art that, you know, hasn't really been touched by the NFT space yet. So I would say just check out those three projects I mentioned: Dequency, Opulus, and Crescendo. Those are free music NFT.
I'm looking for Crescendo. Do you know what their ed is?
Their ed.
Their ets, their Twitter.
handle. I'm not sure about their Twitter, but I can DM you their website after this call.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, sure. And Zestbloom also offers MP3 uploads. Rand Gallery offers MP3 uploads. You know, rudimentary stuff, and maybe not exactly what you want as a musician just yet. But I would say just check out those other projects. Those will probably give you something that you're looking for.
Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all time. Appreciate y'all.
No problem.
Check out Savancy Coin too. He's also possibly signing artists if you're interested in that.
Taco Coin. What was the name of that?
Savancy Coin. He's a German artist.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, definitely, you know, totally unrelated to what we were saying, but music is a pretty untapped NFT market. Excited to see how those platforms grow this year. But we've been going for almost 2 hours. If everyone has said their piece, I think we can call it for today, and that'll be a wrap. Pretty dynamic day in the Algorand ecosystem. Definitely a shifting point. I think everyone can agree, where we all have to reflect a bit on our roles here and like how we can help each other. So I'd say thanks everyone for being helpful to each other. And if Bilal wants to say anything, or Monty or anybody else.
Stay positive, everybody. Stay positive. It's gonna be all right.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you everybody for another great Algofam chat. And like always, as always, every Sunday, just connect and please, we need more interaction between the audience and the usual speakers. So feel free to just ask question next Sunday, please.
All right, great, y'all. See y'all next Sunday, and let's see how this develops through the week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
I have a quick question.